Welcome to Unlocking the Parenting Code. I'm Kathy, and this is a space where we dive into real-life parenting stories. Because let's face it, raising kids today can feel like trying to crack a complicated code. Together we'll explore the ups and downs, share insights, and swap tips that make this journey a little smoother. So grab a cup of coffee, relax, and let's unlock the parenting code together. Today, I'm really quite excited to introduce Mark Papadas, father of 3 grown children, 2 daughters and a son, and a proud grandfather to 3 boys under the age of 3. Mark is a passionate and accomplished author, speaker, and visionary who has over 22 years experience in training, teaching, coaching, improvement, peak performance, and leadership. He is the creator and founder of I Am for Kids, a company dedicated to empowering kids through education and making a difference in communities across the country. This conversation brings a fresh perspective and wisdom on parenting from the grandparent side, exploring the unique joys and challenges of grandparent while reflecting on the changes in parenting over the years. Mark, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Let's start with a personal story, and it can be a parenting story or a grandparenting story, whatever you would choose to talk about. But focusing on the challenges that you had to face, how you navigated the situation, and what you learned, because it's likely that somebody listening to this episode at some point will hear something in your story that helps them along the parenting road.
Okay, well, this one might be a little heavy, I guess you could say, to begin with, but it was one of the things that my first child taught me when she was maybe 1.5 to 2 years old. And in that, what I learned was that how they will mimic us no matter what we tell them to do, right?
Yeah.
So I used to, when I say that I had a temper, I don't necessarily mean that I ever went like off the deep end. I've never struck anybody out of anger kind of thing. But sometimes when things would trigger me, so to speak, where I would get angry, it was a physical response. And I always like to say it was kind of like my spine was a thermometer, and I could literally feel it starting at the base of the thermometer, and then when I could feel it coming up my back until I got to the top, and I was just like, right? And I would literally make a face similar to that. And I remember, I'm now divorced, but my wife at the time had said, it's like, you're scary when you do this. Like, well, nobody knows it. I mean, everybody knows I'm not going to do anything, right? But that was just how I would respond, and I would kind of like come over and be like, well, stop that or do that. And I I forget exactly what it was that I did to my daughter that got her upset. And she did that back to me where she charged me with that face. And I was just like, holy crap.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's when it really hit me. And I was like, okay, I've got to change this. And I realized how I can literally just knowing that that is that patterned response that I get when I got angry. So then once I started to feel the mercury moving up my spine, I would literally just roll my head and it would just take it right back down. And literally ever since that time, that has never happened again.
Well, there's nothing quite as powerful as seeing ourself in our children. Like it's a rude awakening a
Oh
lot of
yeah.
times. But when you were saying that, it was kind of like I don't think we give enough support and empathy also to parents of young children, especially young parents of new children, but anybody with young children. And it is so easy to, I don't want to say lose it, but to not be able to automatically regulate yourself, especially, in the beginning. But okay, so I'm sorry, have I interrupted your story or can I jump in here?
Oh, please, please. No, you're good.
So knowing that, how is it different now because you've got 3 little boys, a little bit younger than the story you're talking about.
Right.
So how has that changed? And, how do you see your child parenting at that same time period?
I would say she's doing a better job than I was because I was still learning all of that. And she's experienced it from the child side, but also because of what I do, she has learned a lot from me just from hearing me speak and reading my books and all that kind of stuff. So she does a really good job of working with them where they start to get anxious, not anxious, but with how kids do, right?
Mhm.
They just go from 0 to 100,
Yeah.
and of getting them to change their breathing and to calm down and to focus. So she does an amazing. She's one of the best parents that I've ever come across. So I love the way she does it, and being the grandparent. I'm not there for the limit pushing that they
Yeah.
do for most of it. I'm the fun guy.
Yeah.
So
Mm.
I get off easy as far as that's concerned.
We definitely, there are more tools and strategies and emphasis on how to be a parent today. So it's really quite beautiful to be able to witness that as an adult and see the progress. At the same time, what especially recently, I've been really noticing young moms is usually who I work with, but young parents almost almost going over too much in that direction. Like being so concerned about their level of anxiety or fear of safety, or that it borders on coddling. Like it's almost like, the boundaries of letting a child be independent and experience some of the, parts of childhood. Like it seems like what I'm trying to say, I'm not saying it very well, but there are so many pluses that parents today have. They have information, they can have support groups, they can have coaches. Like there are a lot of tools out there. At the same time, I think young parents today are faced with challenges that we didn't have when we were raising our children. And to find that balance, I think is you really have to be intentional about it.
I agree with you 100%. And I don't want to say so much that there's maybe too much information out there, but that information that is out there that they have access to is so much more widespread in terms of the outlook.
Hmm.
That there are, I see there's a lot of younger parents who are more worried about being their kid's friend
Yeah.
than they are being their parent. They do sometimes put bubble wrap around them
Yeah.
in terms
Yes.
of that, not letting them figure some of those things out for themselves. That
Yeah.
obviously you don't want them to do anything that's going to hurt them, but every once in a while, it's if there's something that may be a temporary kind of thing, that'd be like, okay, that's a lesson learned, as opposed to just
Yeah.
put them in a cocoon.
Well, it empowers them when they're faced with challenges, and you know, it empowers them to feel that they have been successful, or that they have not been successful, but they've learned something that they're confident next time they're going to make different choices. So, yeah.
Well,
Okay. So, sorry.
no, there's another side of that coin in that kids are just naturally curious, right?
Hmm.
They're literally at a cellular level. They're growing and they're exploring. And if you don't allow them that opportunity to explore and then find out the things that work and don't work, you're actually, being a detriment to their development.
So again, I am quite excited about this conversation because I think both you and I have a view that's based on time. And there has been so much since I know since I was raising, or we were raising our son. And there are like I like where my parents would say, go out and play, be back by dinner. Or after dinner, go out, make sure you're home by 8 o'clock. Never asked where you're going. It was just get outside, play with your friends in nature, and that was it. So you did learn a lot about life and about social interactions and the consequences of choices you were making. But there seemed to be just so much freedom. And I don't know whether it's because there's so much information that we're just all more cautious. And plus, the schedule that a lot of children have doesn't allow for a lot of that time for exploration and to, whatever they're curious about. What do you think about that?
I I would say I pretty much agree with about 100% of that. In that the for example, I get asked to write articles and stuff like that, or contribute to articles. And there was one that I came across recently that just made me shake my head. Was about parents, young parents, giving their kids business cards, basically, to give to their friends so that their friends could take them home and the parents could set up a play date.
Wow.
Okay. So again, it's a little bit more of that cocoon,
Yeah.
the geodesic dome around the kid kind of thing. But yeah, it's there's so many things that kids can learn by their own experiences. They don't necessarily, adults underestimate kids so much in terms of their ability to learn and to figure things out. And I think that that's a been getting progressively worse as the generations get younger.
I read some statistics like a few years ago or whatever, and it was comparing the sense of danger that parents felt in the 50s and 60s, 70s, and the degree of fear parents feel today. And of course, it's much higher today. But then they had done some research to find out that is there the reason? Like, how much worse is it today than it was then? And the results that, they published anyway was that there's not a great distance, but our perception of the danger is much greater. So then parents are going to feel they need to protect their children more and not give them that independence and freedom that we had so easily.
And I would tend to agree with you on that. And there's a few different ways of looking at it when you're talking about the actual danger that's out there. So some will say that they're that the degree of danger is the same. It's just for lack of a better term, reporting of
Mhm.
it, right?
Yeah.
The knowledge of it being out there that has increased. But then there's the other people who just, for lack of a better term, don't have the mental capacity to wrap their heads around that, so that they see if I see more of it, then there must be
Be more.
more of it. And we do need to be protective of our kids, but I think it's best to do that within some sort of parameters. I mean, like you were talking about when we were younger, say just go, right? But you can't go any farther than this 3 blocks radius kind of stuff. I need to know where, if I do need to find you, that I can get in the car and find you somewhere, kind
Hmm.
of thing. Um, and then you start looking at with the technology today, where kids have phones at such young ages that they can be responsible, excuse me, they can be responsible for themselves. They can call mom or dad. They can call 911 with the press of a button on a simple phone. The other thing I think that is probably a good idea is to go over some of those potential
Yes.
dangerous circumstances in advance,
Yeah.
and let them know that if this happens, do this, right?
Yeah.
What one of the most common manipulation tools that are used by somebody who is trying to abduct a young kid
Yeah.
is that if you don't behave, if you don't come with me, if you don't be quiet, I'm going to do something bad to your mother, your father, your sister, your whatever. And just let them know that don't fall for that. Right?
Yeah.
That there's the password thing that people use. Like I said, if they don't give you the password, do whatever you have to do, right?
Yeah. I think that's a really good it's a really good strategy for parents. Like I can remember being overly cautious about, like, we just never left our son alone. And I remember when he was about 8 or maybe around 8, grade 2. And at that time we had our own preschool, and my husband would pick our son up and go home with him, and then I would come home on the bicycle. But we lived at the top of a really big hill, so at the end of a work day, I would ask him to come down, pick me and the bicycle up, and then go back home. It took 5 minutes. And our son is very compliant most of the time, easygoing kid. But he started to say, I'm in the middle of whatever he was doing. Can you just go pick mom up yourself? And so it was kind of, okay, he's showing us that he's ready for some independence. Maybe I'm not ready, and so we sat down and we talked about it several times before it actually happened. And we had a signal. So my husband would go out, he'd lock the door, and our son would make sure the door was locked. And then when my husband got to where he was picking me up at the bottom of the hill, I would call home. But I had, maybe I'm a bit anal, but I had told our child not to answer the phone unless it was the signal. And the signal was when we were ready to come back, I would ring, let it ring twice, hang up, ring again, let it ring once, and then he would know when we came to the door, it was us. So we did that, and for a long time, it was clockwork, and he was so empowered, it was really a beautiful thing. And then one day, because it was so smooth, I forgot the call. It was just one of those days, and we arrived at home, and I rang the bell, no answer. And it's like, what? So I got the key out, the house key out, and had the key in the door and finally opened it. And there's my son, this little 8-year-old, standing on the top of the step with a butcher knife. And I said, what are you doing? And he said, there was no signal. So it was kind of like, it was just such a good parenting moment to recognize no matter what happens, things don't work out the way that we plan them. And so the more resources we can give our child so that eventually they can think for themselves when something is happening that's not in the plan book. I mean, it terrified me to see that knife in his hand. I don't know what he would have done with it except to threaten somebody, but I think sometimes that can alleviate some of our fears when we know that we've had those conversations with our children.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
So, speaking of conversations, now that your children are grown up, how do you balance offering them support and advice and still allowing them or giving them the respect to parent in their own way, especially if it's different from what you think would be a better idea?
Well, again, I think that kind of goes back to how I raised them, because I've always been that way in terms of giving them uh, not so much leeway, what's the word I'm looking for, but choices, if you will.
Mhm.
So one of the things for example, that I talk about in my book that I applied with them and it is translating to now is if they had done something wrong, more often than not, I would ask them what they thought was an appropriate punishment.
Mhm.
And more often than not, they were way more, zealous than I was in terms of,
Yes.
no, I don't think you need to be grounded for a month. I think a week without your Xbox is sufficient
Yeah.
for this level of offense kind of thing,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I do the same thing now, and the beautiful thing about the relationship that I have with my kids is they come to me. I usually don't have to say, I wouldn't do things this way. When they have a question, they will ask me in advance. But usually I tend to see myself more in what they're doing. In other words, if they were paying
Yeah.
attention, they got something from what was going on 10, 20, close to 30 years ago now.
I was just thinking when you were saying that, when someone asks me, raising our child, are there things that you will definitely do that your parents did raising you? And are there things that you definitely would not do? And I was very blessed. And it was almost, I'm going to try to parent, modernize it, but in a very similar way for all the core values, all the basics, the foundation. I'd like to do it just like my parents did. I didn't realize when I first answered that way that there are so many people that are not able to answer that way. And so many people will be determined to, flip the switch and parent very, very different than they were parent. So it sounds like your children are parenting like they were parenting. Did you parent like you were parented?
No.
Okay, so you started the difference.
Yes, yeah. My parents were, born in the 30s,
Mhm.
right? So my father was he was loving but very stoic.
Yeah.
He worked a lot of hours and odd hours so that he could get the overtime and the better shift pay kind of thing. So he was definitely not the emotional support person like I was to my kids.
Yeah.
And I always wanted to make sure that I wasn't just the disciplinarian, if you will, because that's basically what my dad was and what a lot of dads are. Uh, and then I think there was another thing that not like I needed to be forced to, but it basically wound up that's what wound up happening was, especially when my first child was born, there were some complications during it wasn't even a delivery. They had to do an emergency C-section because of something that was going on in my wife. She was having appendicitis that they couldn't find. They didn't know what the problem was.
Mm.
So, I was the first one to hold her. I was the first one to feed her. I was the first one to change her diaper. My then wife was successful in business, so she was traveling a lot. So I was changing diapers. I was preparing dinner when she was out of town and stuff like that. And I traveled as well. So I mean, we made it work. But there's a lot of dads that don't have that hands-on experience with their kids of just literally just the physical connection of bonding. And if you don't have that, it's hard to have the type of relationship that I have with my kids and my grandkids if I didn't have that from the very beginning.
Yeah. And I think it can be complicated for people because women sometimes think for some reason that just because they're women and because they have, carried that baby for 9 months, that they know how to do it better. And sometimes I think the fathers, um, they're not empowered. They're not given the grace to do things their way. And I agree with you. I think it is really, really important to do that. Okay. There's a big topic that I think um, you will have a viewpoint that is uh, something that young parents today, I think they need to hear these conversations, and it's all around technology. So technology is really impacting children today, and regulations are not at a level where you can say, oh, well, I don't need to monitor that much. But it's affecting the way that our children are developing, and it's different. So, how do you see your role in what do you see your role? So, as a grandparent and a parent, trying to navigate a new world that is so intense with technology.
Well, so far I'm fortunate in that they're so young. So they haven't gotten to the point to where they have to worry about social media and any of that kind of stuff. But there is still the whole screen time dilemma. The Especially in our case, under three can be difficult.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So, and it's funny to watch the difference between the kids, the grandkids themselves, in terms of, so my oldest grandchild just turned 3, and he loves to watch TV. So my daughter, she had made a point to, when he was younger, to make sure that it was educational stuff. So I'm not sure if you're familiar with Miss Rachel on YouTube. She's all about language
Okay.
and teaching them, their colors, their shapes, but most importantly is how to pronounce them. And she'll actually walk through the shape of the mouth and stuff like that. But she does it in a fun and engaging way. And he loved Miss Rachel.
Hmm.
So he was actually getting a benefit. It wasn't just putting on some mindless
Yeah.
cartoon. I don't mean to denigrate SpongeBob, but
Yeah.
you're not learning much from watching SpongeBob, kind of thing, right?
Right.
So then the now middle child, who's roughly 22 months old, he will watch that for a little bit, and then he'll just go off, grab a toy, just be on his own, play by himself, just to amuse himself. And obviously the baby, who's now a little over 2 months old, he does what those guys do. You set him down and he stays there because he he can't really
No
move around.
choice.
Yeah, exactly. That was probably the best parenting advice that I gave my daughter when she was pregnant the first time. I was like, the first 6 months or so were easy, because wherever you set them down, that's where they're going to be when you come back.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's once
Yeah,
they
for
can
sure.
locomote that you have a problem, so.
Okay, so what you're saying is that technology itself, especially in the younger years, isn't something to be so concerned with as long as you're intentional about what and maybe how much time a child is in front of a screen.
Yeah, and kind of like we talked about before, is of the setting of the limits,
Hmm.
of that we're not just going to plop you in front of the TV and then you're going to do this for 3 hours. You get to watch, one episode of Spidey and Friends,
Yeah.
right? So that they understand, okay, when this is over, okay, this is over. And then it's time to go take our bath, to go eat dinner, to whatever. So I think, like you said, the intention to me is probably the biggest point in dealing with the technology, because
Yeah.
you can't keep them away from it.
Yeah, exactly. So you have to figure out how to use it to the best for everybody. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. I won't go. I was going to go down another road, but I'll leave that as it is. Okay, I do have a question though. So I would like to know what's the biggest challenge that you have faced both as a parent and a grandparent. So thinking first when you were parenting, what do you feel was your biggest challenge? And then as a grandparent, what do you find?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I would say when it came to being the parent, it was probably more of when they got a little older,
Mhm.
when it had to do with peer pressure and things of that nature, to where we tried to pre-frame things with them, that before, as they're approaching those ages when they can make good or bad choices that will have an impact on them, to say that people are going to provide these choices, and they're going to try and get you to go in a specific way, and to trust your gut. If you don't think that's the right way, don't be afraid to stand up for yourself, and also know that we've got your back. That if you ever, we won't ask any questions. You need us to come and get you, we will come and get you. We'll talk about it later, but we've got your back. So I think that was probably the toughest one, as far as being the parent. With the grandparent, I would say I've been fortunate. There probably really hasn't been one yet,
Hmm.
because I think they're doing a great job of parenting them. So like I said, I get to be the fun guy and play around with them. They love coming over to Papa's pool,
Yeah.
uh, and I guess, let me use that as part of my answer. Then I said I think I do have one, is teaching them that not everything is, and speaking as them, not everything is mine. So like when they come over to my pool, the boys will, to a certain extent, argue about who gets to jump off the side of the pool to Papa.
Hmm.
and they want to have me to themselves. It's like, no, we take turns. I said, you know, you'll jump in. I said, you'll swim to mom, then you jump in, and that we're starting to get through that. But the younger one is still at the age where he gets it, but he doesn't fully get it yet.
Yeah. Yeah, they're young.
Yeah,
They're young for that. What would you say, like when you really look at the whole, how old is your oldest now?
she's 30.
How what would you say was the most challenging period, like the age range for you as a parent?
I'd say for the oldest one was probably high school.
Hmm. Yeah.
uh, Specifically, I would say freshman through junior year. Senior year, she seemed to get it. She's always been an older soul, a mature soul.
Yeah.
The My younger daughter was definitely the college years, where it was the first times where she was really out on her own
Hmm.
and had to learn from her mistakes in terms of setting those boundaries more for herself
Yeah.
than anything else. And then with my son, uh, again, it was probably junior, senior in high school, freshman, sophomore year in college. So a different 4 year span where I don't want to say so much he had some identity issues, but there were some things that he wouldn't come to us about that he did when he was younger. And also has now realized that it's okay to come to us again.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say for our son, it was those years, those first years that he was out of our home. And one of the things that I struggled with, like it really was a struggle, was to focus on our relationship and our connection rather than focusing on trying to help him solve his problems or giving him advice about, what he was doing and what the possible consequences. It was kind of like he was a young adult. He was making choices, not choices I was very happy about, but I had to choose because I knew if I was going to step in and be the teacher, that probably our relationship would be damaged and maybe he wouldn't come to me and tell me, everything that was going on in his world. So I really found that a challenging time. So in those challenging times, what was your focus?
To me, my focus is always asking questions.
Hmm.
So very rarely did I ever tell my kids to do something.
Yeah.
It was always asking them the questions so that it made them think about, okay, I didn't think about that before, and then getting them to figure out what their options were, but then always letting them choose their options. And then if they chose one that I didn't necessarily agree with, I would let them know that, but I would basically say, hey, that's your choice.
Yeah.
I would do things a little bit differently, but you do what works for you. More often than not, they realize that I wasn't trying to dictate their lives, and a lot of times they would go like, okay, well, I trust your judgment. I am going to go this way as opposed to that way. Uh, but that's always been my focus is to get them to choose wisely, to quote the Indiana Jones movie.
Yeah. 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 That's a good piece of advice to keep in mind. If you could go back in time and give yourself one piece of parenting advice from what you know now, what would it be?
You asked some tough questions. I think it would be to, especially early on, to just relax a little bit.
Mm.
It's not as tough as you're making it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's hard for people to understand. And I think one of the not so positive side effects of social media and knowing so much is that you compare so much and you think, if I'm going to be a good parent, then I need to be doing this, 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 and this. And lives can get really full and hectic.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, being reminded to just kind of like slow down and smell the roses, and just appreciate the blessing that you've been given with a child, really.
Mhm.
So, yeah. Um, what do you think that your children have continued to learn from you, watching you as the grandparent? Or have they not? Is it just kind of like, oh, well, that's dad?
I think it is a little bit more of that's, that's just how dad is. But I also I think that one of the things that we've actually had the discussion in terms of there's a reason why the kids, not the grandkids, but the kids think that they're less important when the grandkids come.
Mm.
And that's because a lot of the times, to a certain extent, they are because they're self-functioning, right? We've
Yeah.
already enjoyed that experience over 10, 20, however many years, right?
Yeah.
When the grandkids come and I explain this to them is we get to relive the great moments that we had in their childhood with these new versions of them.
Mhm.
And once we had that conversation, I remember literally their eyes kind of being like, they just enlightened. Oh, I get that now. And so yeah. So I just, they recognize me being the same way with their kids as I was with them. So sorry for the long-winded answer that should have been.
No, no, that was a great example, and it kind of emphasizes the fact that sometimes I think we miss, like we think as they get older, they don't need us so much. And I think the reality is once you have a child, you are a parent for life. And it
Yep.
changes, but you are their mom and their dad for life. And they need you in a variety of different ways when they go through different parts of their life. So it's a full-time, lifetime job.
Yes, I concur wholeheartedly.
So, what would be the legacy that you hope to leave both your children and grandchildren in terms of family values and love?
Ah, that's something that I pride myself on. So I would always rather be remembered, whether it's by them or by the world, as a person who was giving, loving, supportive, etc., than better than more than being if better than being rich, good looking, anything like that kind of stuff, right? So I've figured that if I provide the example by which they learn how to live that way, I'm I'm a happy man.
Yeah. What would you say is the most important character trait to develop as a human?
I'm going to answer that a little bit differently than the way you asked it.
Sure.
And I believe that every kid is born with all of those character traits and characteristics that they need to be successful in life. And it's the BS, the belief system that they learn from the people around them as they're growing up, that actually sabotages them. So to me, there's three answers to that question. So to me, the number one to net it's not so much to develop, but to never lose is persistence.
Hmm.
Okay. It's like I always just think about it. When was the last time you saw a kid quit trying to walk? Right? What do? They fall down, they may hurt themselves, they may cry, but what do? They wipe themselves out, they get back up and they just keep going until they do it. Right? They keep feeding themselves, right? They're the spaghetti sauce or whatever, like all over themselves, but eventually they get it to the point to where that doesn't happen, right? So that's persistence is number one. Number two is curiosity. So they're naturally curious. They're naturally learning all of the time. And a quote that I came up with about 15 years ago that a lot of people think is quite profound is that when a person loses curiosity, the horizons of their world fold up to become the walls of their box.
Ooh, that's quite powerful.
So yeah, there's a reason that's part of the reason why I'm always asking questions. And so if you once you lose curiosity, you're pretty much done. And then the third one is ingenuity, is that there's a reason why kids will often rather play with the box that a gift came in than the gift itself. And that's partly because usually the gift has a specific purpose, right? You can use it for one thing, right? That's whatever that is. But the box can be can be a house, it could be a submarine, it could be an airplane, it could be a boat, it could, you name it, it could be any number of things that you could use it for. And kids are so ingenious with how they do that. I like to say is that kids don't have to think out of the box because they haven't built the box
Yeah.
to think in yet. So to me, those are the three not popular, but most powerful ones to keep as opposed to develop.
Those are very important ones. I agree totally with you.
Thank you.
Tell me, is there any parenting challenge that you are still working on today?
I would say to a certain, I don't want to say it's caring too much, but it's the knowing when to hold back. So it's kind of like we were talking about when they were little. It's and I guess you'd say I told some people that maybe they cocoon their kids too much. It's still a little bit of that with, okay, I'm gonna let you figure this one out on your own. When I know the answer. And that sometimes is the hard part.
Yeah, that doesn't change. Again, it's kind of like by doing that though, you are putting your relationship first.
Yeah.
Like by not stepping in. I would say that's my same challenge is trying to not like trying to respect that they do have their own world, that even though I want them to, come over every weekend and, that that's not always going to happen and it's got nothing to do with me and our relationship. But yes, that accepting and not going overboard, not overboard, just respecting um,
Hmm.
this particular stage in their life and what they need. Okay, before we get into the last questions, how would you define success as a parent? And do you feel like you've been successful? And how would you tell somebody that, they look like they are successful? What does that look like for you?
Well, as far as what it looks like to me, or the definition would be being proud of the person that they are. So regardless of whatever level of development they are, whether they're 10 years old or 30 years old, if you're proud of who they are as a person, so I've told my kids this, and I've said this publicly when I've been on stage and stuff like that, is that I would want to be friends with my kids, even if they weren't my kids, just because I think that they're awesome people. So to me, that's the definition of success.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree. And I think part of that comes from, the children when they come in, they've got something, that's uniquely theirs. But I do think that when we're really intentional about parenting and we're really reflective and we're really curious, then I think we can create an environment where they do grow up to be those people that, it's just like, that's a good one. Like that, that's a kind, caring human being. And just, yeah, there's some beautiful pride that goes with that.
Mhm.
Okay. You would have a longer, I'm up to the second to the last question here, and this one is for fun. And when I was thinking about it, I thought, well, yours might be longer than anybody else's because what I'm asking is what would be a title of a movie about your family life? So now you have quite a long family history. So what would the title be? And then what would a short synopsis be of the movie?
Wow, that's one I've never thought of. Because being a bit of a movie buff, my
Mhm.
mind is trying to think of one that's already been made,
Yeah.
right? Like uh, something like that. I would say some people might take it the wrong way, but something like the Wild Bunch.
Hmm.
And I don't necessarily mean wild in a feral way,
Yeah.
but we've always allowed for the fun, the joy, the 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 wild part of it is letting them figure things out and not being afraid to laugh about it. And we've played so many games where literally tears are running down your eyes because down your face because we're just laughing so hard at whatever happened and not taking things personal.
Hmm.
Um, so the synopsis would be, I guess you could say, five souls coming together as one.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you. All right. The last question that I always ask is connected with something that's already happened to you. So I thought of arranging the question differently, and I thought, no, because maybe you didn't have this conversation. The question is to picture yourself when one of your children is having their first child. So you are becoming a grandparent for the first time. And what kind of wisdom would you share with them as they're just starting out on this parenting road?
I think I might have to answer that to a certain extent with a hypothetical. And let me explain why. When my oldest, like I said, she's always been a mature soul, and she's wanted to be a mom for the longest time. She actually told us when she was younger that she wanted to be a mom, if not for the social stigma of having a kid in high school, she wanted to be a mom then.
Hmm.
But she made the better choice of waiting. And she is, having seen her because she worked as a nanny and all that kind of stuff, she's a natural at it. So my advice for her was pretty much what I had told you before, is just don't worry about it. Just be you.
Yeah.
And the easy part is the beginning, and you'll learn the rest as you're going on. So I would say that I would probably answer your question more of like what would be the advice I would give to, probably more to my son, because both my daughters are fairly similar in that natural motherly tendency, and they're just awesome with kids of any age. Whereas my son, he is as well. I mean, he's worked in summer camps and stuff like that with the younger kids, but to make sure that he is active in the child's life, to make sure that he does get that bonding, make sure you hold that baby when that baby is young,
Mm.
because there is literally nothing that will replace that bond that is forged then.
Yeah. Yeah. Good advice. Well, I'm going to wrap things up here, but I'd like to just give you a chance, which I don't usually do this either, but I should. Is there, like, I do think that there is a wealth of wisdom that comes just from being around longer than, somebody else. And I think people are wanting to have parents, are wanting to have really good support. Like, even like all the things you said just make so much sense, and they're not complicated. They're basic. And sometimes I find one of the biggest challenges is to have a young parent really trust their instincts. It's kind of like, yeah, go learn everything. Like, read all the books, do the courses, everything you need, and then trust yourself. Take what resonates and trust yourself. And that's it's more challenging for some people than it is for others, but I think it's something that at this point in time, I can say with confidence. When you trust your instincts and you follow that gut feeling, you won't go wrong.
I agree 100%. I call it the little voice,
Mhm.
right? Is that very rarely will your little voice be wrong. So I, I've done it myself. We all have, where we'll talk ourselves out of, so where the little voice is kind of going like, it's usually about a person.
Mhm.
And it's like the little voice is kind of, there's something about this person. but so and so likes him or her, and I need that person in my life, what that person does in my life right now. So like, okay, so I won't trust the little voice, and then you wind up going like, I should have listened to my little voice.
Yeah.
So I would say that if the little voice is telling you something negative, trust it. It's not so much that it's easy, but a lot of us have been fooled by people who they were so good at it that the little voice never came up. And that's just part of life. We're going to come across those people.
Yeah.
But yeah, I definitely agree. Trust your gut. Listen to the little voice.
And is there any final, little parts of wisdom that you want to share before we sign off?
No, I would just say that once again, whether you're being a parent or a grandparent, is to consciously decide who you are. What type of a parent or grandparent are you going to be? And drill that into your conscious and self-conscious. I think that was one of the things that gave me an advantage over a lot of young parents when I was growing up, was I had done that. I didn't, not just as the type of parent that I was going to be, but literally the person and the man that I am. So once you do that, and once you drill it into that, let's say that's subconscious and conscious being of who you are, it's almost impossible to act in a way that's different from that. So your intuition will get better once you know who you are, because you just, all you have to do is act in character.
Yeah, that's really good advice. Because I think a lot of young people are bombarded by what others think they should be, as far as, a person, a parent, whatever. So that's really, really good advice for people. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Well, thank you so much for joining me today. And I do think that this is a really valuable episode for people to get little tidbits that are going to make their parenting life better. So thank you very much for sharing your insights.
It's my pleasure.
If you're a parent raising a boy in today's complex world, be sure to explore sonhoodcoaching.com. You'll discover expert guidance and support designed to help you unlock your full parenting potential. As Amelia Gumbetti says, this job is too difficult and too beautiful to do alone. Together we can explore this adventure and discover the magic of raising boys.